I am the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I want to talk about Heidegger's Being and Time. As explained in the previous essay, Martin Heidegger's big project in Being and Time, and continuing in his lectures on metaphysics, including his Introduction to Metaphysics and What is Metaphysics series, is to deal with the question of being. He thinks we have forgotten this question, even though metaphysics is a primary pursuit for philosophy. However, metaphysics, as it is usually done, explains beings instead of being. In his Introduction to Metaphysics, he adopts a linguistic hermeneutical approach, investigating how the ancient Greeks talked about being. In What is Metaphysics, he takes a path through the nothing to get to being. Contrary to common belief, the opposite of being is not nothing. Being qua being has no categorical opposition. Nothing is instead an aspect of being, and we can discover the nothing through our phenomenological experience of the mood of anxiety. It is not a being since it is nothing, and in fact should not be understood as a noun, but as a verb, since according to Heidegger, nothing nothings. In Being and Time, he adopts a phenomenological approach to try and examine what being is through the lived experience of the kind of beings for whom being is itself an issue. He names this being Dasein, literally being there, a being who is present in the world, who has arrived there by being thrown into the facticity of this world. This being, upon its arrival into the world, did not create how the world is. It nonetheless has to navigate this world and figure out how to live in it. To be clear, this being, that is Dasein, is the human being. No other being, such as rocks, plants, or animals, have an issue with being as being. Like nothing, being is also not a being and should also be understood as a verb, to be, as Heidegger explained in his Introduction to Metaphysics. Hence, the question of being can be rephrased as, what does it mean to be? I had read Being and Time years ago when I already began writing my synoptic essays for my YouTube channel. But the book was so complicated and hard to understand that I gave up the idea of making a synopsis until I came across the Bloomsbury companion to Heidegger when I was making a synopsis of Heidegger's Introduction to Metaphysics. Hence, in this essay, I depend a lot on Dennis J. Schmidt's entry in the Bloomsbury Companion on the book. Being and Time is an incomplete work. Heidegger had intended it to be in two parts with 3 divisions each, but only managed to partially complete the first part. Part 1 interprets Dasein and explicates how time is the horizon for asking the question of being. Part 2 was to pick apart the history of ontology, which to him made the fatal error of mistaking beings as being. This critique was to enable Heidegger to better formulate and tackle what to him is the vital question of ontology, which is what being is. What he finally published in 1927 was the first 2 divisions of Part 1. He finally gave up writing the remaining 4 divisions, realizing that he would have to revise the first part in order to add the second. Hence, the work we do have is really more about Dasein and time rather than being and time. In the first division, he analyzes how Dasein comes to exist as it does. He asserts that this being that asks the question of being has 2 key features. 1. Dasein recognizes that his being is such that it is always his. 2. The essence of this being lies in its to be its existence. Schmidt summarizes, Dasein is inalienably singular and so must be understood in its concreteness, and it is always unfinished and underway. That is, it is always a matter of possibilities that it is to be or not to be, and thus it is more than simply something actual. Beings are actual and present as Dasein also is. Yet, Dasein is more than just actual and present. Heidegger wants to understand the structures that make a being such as Dasein possible. He terms these structures existentials. As Schmidt explains, Dasein exists in and as these structures. These structures are the condition that enable a being such as Dasein to exist. We exist within these conditions but are also formed by them. The structures delineate the way Dasein's life can unfold. Since Dasein is the kind of being that asks about being and its own being, Dasein discloses itself to itself. This self-disclosure, however, is not cognitive, but simply the way the existentials unfold. In their unfolding, the world is disclosed, and since Dasein is part of the world, Dasein is also disclosed. The world discloses itself through its unfolding, and human beings have the ability to understand what is revealed. Since we are part of this world that is revealed, we are also being revealed. As we have the ability to understand what is revealed, we can understand the world and also ourselves as part of the revelation or disclosure of the world. If not for Dasein, if not for this kind of being that has the ability to understand the world's unfolding disclosure, the unfolding will still carry on, but with no being to understand what is disclosed through the unfolding. However, just because we have the ability to understand does not mean that we automatically understand everything. The ability just provides the possibility to understand. Our ability cuts both ways. While Dasein has the ability to disclose itself to itself, to uncover the truth of itself and the world, it also means that it has the ability to hide from itself, to not disclose and not uncover the truth. Dasein hides from itself by losing itself in das Man, often translated as the day, the masses with their groupthink, becoming entangled in the everyday concerns of life such that it forgets about the fundamental nature of its being, as the kind of being for which being is an issue. Heidegger sees Dasein's pursuit of disclosure as authentic being, while he views its hiding from itself as inauthentic being. The coming into existence of Dasein is thus the event whereby the existential structure, in making possible a being like Dasein, also makes the world knowable to itself. In finding itself in the world and in being such a being as Dasein, Dasein cares about its own being through asking itself about itself, how it is to be. It is ahead of itself in the sense that it is not already complete and fixed, but needs to try to figure out continuously how it should be and work towards that. However, even when Dasein reaches its goal, that only opens up for Dasein how it should next be, since Dasein's being is never completed while time remains for it. In Division 2, Heidegger writes, as long as Dasein is, something is always outstanding, what it can and will be. Time does run out for each individual Dasein when it inevitably dies. In death, Dasein reaches completion or wholeness. Yet we never experience this completion, since we do not experience our own deaths. That is because there are no experiences when we are not alive. Yet, in being a being towards death, death has a meaning for our existence, affecting how we live. According to Heidegger, death calls to our conscience, though he does not mean conscience as something moral. Instead, conscience discloses, interrupting the everydayness of our regular lives to summon Dasein back to itself. Consciousness does so not through words, but in the mode of silence, by reminding itself of death. One's death is one's own, only to be undergone by oneself. We may be present at the death of others, but we do not undergo their deaths. Our deaths bring to completion our wholeness, which is only something in the future. But since there is at death no more future, Dasein is at its point of death whole, but also finished. As Dasein, we are oriented towards the future, targeting a completion the way a donkey chases after a carrot suspended before its nose. However, when we reach a goal, so long as we are still alive, we remain incomplete and so continue our journey of becoming. Unlike the donkey, we do finally catch the carrot. We finally do become our being, but we are then dead. Time is the horizon of being. The existential structures are modes of temporality. The movement of time is the basis of Dasein's being, making Dasein a historical being, of the past, of the present, in addition to being a being ahead of itself as it is directed towards the future. Time is not just a collection of present moments succeeding one another, but what forms the unity and ground of Dasein. Time is an existential structure of Dasein, and hence our existence is a process. While we have a past, we are situated in the present but oriented towards the future. We are thrown into the world, which has its facticity, but our being is ultimately our own. As Dasein, we are the kinds of beings who ask about being and also about our own being. We care about our own being, which makes us continuously ask ourselves about ourselves, how we are to be. In conclusion, the world unfolds, disclosing itself to whatever is there who can understand its disclosure. We, as Dasein, have the ability to understand what is disclosed. And since we are part of the world that is disclosing, we also understand ourselves through the world's disclosure. However, this ability to understand, to self-disclose, also means the ability to not disclose and to hide from the truth. We hide by losing ourselves in caring about what Dasman cares about, by busying ourselves with everydayness to the exclusion of caring about being. This will be to live inauthentically, while to live authentically will be to pursue the disclosure of the truth of being. Death is an inevitable part of our being, which then calls to our conscience, summoning us back to ourselves. We can heed its call or we can ignore it. We have the ability to decide how our beings should be given the facticity of the world, which means we bear the responsibility also. We are always our own being. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.